Don't go anywhere, just listen first. Jaya Radha, it's okay. Madhava Kunjabi Hari, Jaya Radha Madhava. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari. Jai Mr. Paramahansa, Padurika Acharya, Ashtotar to the Srimad Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jaya Vishnupad Paramahansa, Padurika Acharya, Ashtotar to the Srimad Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnavini Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Krantaraj srimadbhagavatam Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktavinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotee. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to Sri Guru and Gauranga. Narayanam namaskritya Narang chaiva narottamam Deving Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiriye. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, we should offer our respectful obeisances unto Lord Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada, the translator, commentator, and our spiritual master. Nashta prayesha bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavat Yuttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes on Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering devotional service to the pure devotee, all that is inauspicious within the heart is destroyed almost to nil, and loving devotion to the Supreme Lord is glorified who is glorified in transcendental songs is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 6th day of November 2019 in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, a translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in the 4th canto, the creation of the 4th order, 20th chapter, Lord Vishnu's appearance in the sacrificial arena of Maharaj Prithu. Text number 17. Text number 17. Maitreya uvacha Saitam loka guruna Vishwaksenena Vishwajit Anushashita Adesham Shidasa Jagrihe Hare Maitreya Uvacha Sahitam Loka Guruna Vishwaksenena Vishwajit Anushashita Adesham Shidasa Jagrihe Hare Maitreya Uvacha Sahitam Loka Guruna Vishwaksenena Vishwajit Anushashita Adesham Shidasa Jagrihe Hare Maitreya Uvacha Sahitam Loka Guruna Vishwaksenena Vishwajit Anushashita Adesham Shidasa Jagrihe Hare Uvacha Sahitam Loka Guruna Vishwaksenena Vishwajit Anushashita Adesham Shidasa Jagrihe Hare. Not yet. Word by words. Maitreya Uvacha. Maitreya said, Saha, he, Ittam, thus, Loka Guruna, by the Supreme Master of all people, Vishwaksenena, by the personality of Godhead, Vishwajit, the conqueror of the world, Maharaj Prithu, Anushasitaha, being ordered, Adesham, instructions, Shidasa, on the head, Jagrihe, accepted, Harehe, of the personality of Godhead. Translation. The great saint Maitreya continued, My dear Vidura, in this way Maharaj Prithu, the conqueror of the entire world, accepted the instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead on his head. Purport. One should accept the instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead by bowing down at the lotus feet of the Lord. This means that anything spoken by the Personality of Godhead should be taken as it is, with great care and attention, and with great respect. It is not our business to amend the words of the Supreme Personality of Godhead or make additions or alterations, as it has become a custom for many so-called scholars and swamis who comment on the words of the Bhagavad Gita. Here the practical example of how to accept the instruction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is shown by Prithu Maharaj. This is the way to receive knowledge through the Parampara system. Om Jnana Timarandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmidatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him and all members of Shri Parampara. So the conditioned soul finds himself in the material world, in many different species of life. And in most of those species, there's no asking of why or should, or all these questions that we find in human life. There's just the impulses of the mind and the senses, according to what we call instinct, but we know it's actually super soul, and giving them impetus of how to act and where to go and what to do in order to solve the basic problems of where to find enough to eat, where to find a mate, how to protect oneself from all the dangers which are always around, and finally, after all the exhausting work that takes, to take rest, eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. But when it comes to human life, we have a much greater responsibility, because those questions do arise. why should we do something, and should we do it, and then comes the question of how to do it. It's not so obvious, and so there's bring the intellect involved and this whole sense of right and wrong, which comes. It's a blessing, but as well it's a curse in the sense that if you have no access to real knowledge of what is the right thing to do and should you do it, then you're bound to make mistakes, violate the laws of God, violate the laws of nature, and suffer. And that's what's been going on for millions of births. Who knows how many times we've come up to this human platform before and completely blown it, and then gone right back down into the species. It's uncounted. That's why it said anadi kadamapale, that it's practically beginningless, our stay in this material world. So Prithu Maharaj is showing it. It's quite an amazing. We've been reading his pastimes now for a few chapters, and some of them it's very hard to distinguish between him and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I think in some places he's even called the Personality of Godhead, even though it's very clear that he's an empowered jiva, but he's empowered practically more than any other Shaktivesh in terms of the sheer majesty of his power to, go after the earth and do all the things that he's done. But in the last, this chapter, after this whole incident with Indra, stopping the sacrifice, and him threatening Indra and becoming so angry, and him needing to be kind of reined in that anger with good instruction, we find that he's now acting exactly like the best devotee, isn't it? He's completely given up his idea of punishing Indra. In fact, you'll find that in the next verse, which I won't be here to hear, unfortunately, he gives him a big hug. He embraces Indra. And the tears are flowing and everything. It's a whole complete change of mood here. Because he's been purified by the instructions of the Lord himself, and he's risen up to a different platform, and he's completely forgiven Indra and realized what's the big deal with this 100 sacrifice? Why become so attached to it? It almost reminds me, I won't be able to share it with you this time because I have to rush and get ready for my trip tomorrow. But I was reading, because we just heard that wonderful class by Rajendranathana Prabhu on the day we celebrated the Govardhan Puja, with all of these details that the acharyas have given us about what happened under that hill and how the whole thing happened, and there's much more. So I thought, well, let me look and see how the Gopal Champu describes it. This is a book by Jiva Goswami. Champu is a certain literary creation style of writing. It's also Ananda Vrindavan Champu by Kavi Karnapur we have translation of. And what it is the same pastimes that you'll find in the 10th canto, but kind of with a tremendous more amount of detail. Just like you read some novel. I used to, as a kid, I used to read Dickens a lot, and like that. And all, the thing that absorbs you so much is all the details, the descriptions of the characters and the emotions going on in the atmosphere and the describing, And so that's what you get in these champus. A remarkable amount of detail, and it's all Krishna Lila. But the Bhagavatam is really an outline, in other words, of Krishna Lila, the 10th canto. It gives you all the important aspects, and there's some wonderful detail in there. But if you read, or when you read the writings of the Goswamis, you see that it is just an outline. The Dagda Madhava, the play, gives you all these details of Krishna's meeting with the gopis and this and that. It's just a whole other level. So there's unlimited expansion of these pastimes. In other words, just as Krishna is unlimited, so the varieties of ways in which he interacts with his servants and his friends and his lovers and his parents in the spiritual world is ever fresh. What does it mean that it's ever fresh? It means that there's newer and newer aspects and newer and newer exploration of it, Unlike in this world, where kind of everything gets stale really fast, and then you have to have a new style, a new this, a new friend, a new, and finally you get a new body to try all over again. So here we find that this particular verse is about how Maharaj Prithu accepted these instructions. And it's very instructive to us how to accept the instructions by bowing him down. He accepted them on his head. Now, it reminded me of this thing I read fairly recently about what is the meaning of this word namaha, which we utter all the time. Namaste Saraswati Devi Namo Mahavadanyaya. You know, it's a central part of our liturgy, really. And many of you may have heard this, and maybe you didn't hear this before, that there is a book written by Sanatana Goswami called Krishna Lila Stava, which is a wonderful book. It's a summary of Krishna's Vrindavan pastimes in almost 400 verses, short verses. And interspersed in them are obeisances. He'll tell a pastime, and then after the pastime is namaha, namaha, namaha. So that's a central part of the book. And at the beginning of that, my old friend Gopi Paramananda Prabhu, dearly departed, translated that book, and he gave a nice little explanation from the Padma Purana, I believe it was. So what is the real significance of this word, namaha? How do we understand it? You know, sometimes. So first of all, it describes there's different levels, just as there are different levels of devotees, you know, and different levels. There are different levels of this namaha. The example I like to give is, if you ever fly an India airline, I don't recommend it, but you may have to at some point. You know, all of the flight attendants will say namaste, namaste. You know, that's a common greeting in India anyway. And that's more or less just a polite hello, you know. It's not saying I'm actually bowing down to you. That's what it means, you know. But it's hello and welcome and like that, right? There may even be this mood. So that's the first level, just kind of polite. Then there's the level that we often do, which is bowing down, bent like that, you know, without the full dandavats. And that's a more serious bowing down, you know. But the ultimate one that is described is the dandavats, the full obeisances, when the full meaning of namaste comes out. And they've analyzed it this way. The word namaha can be broken up into two syllables, na and ma, which can be taken to mean not mine. Not mine. What is not mine? This body I'm placing at your disposal. Whether it's Krishna, the Guru, you know, or whatever, whoever exalted personality you're offering obeisance to. So that's kind of the essence of surrender when you think about it. I am at your disposal. We even have an English phrase that kind of mimics that. I am at your disposal, meaning that whatever you want me to do, I'll do, right? But really, there's limits. You know, it's understood that I'm not going to surrender to you and serve you for the rest of my life without, you know. But that's what the word actually means when it's taken seriously, and you really offer those obeisances with full understanding and heart. So that's what's going on here. When it means he accepted the instructions on his head, it's just like Arjun says, Kadashe vachanang tava. You know, the Bhagavad Gita ends in that. By your mercy, my illusion has now been dispelled, and Kadashe vachanang tava, I will do as you say. In other words, my will is completely dovetailed with yours. That's full surrender. So that's what it means here. He took the instructions on his head. And what were the instructions? To forgive Indra, you know, but it was all of that other stuff about protecting the praja. You remember? He was instructing him how to be the proper king. So he's accepting all of those instructions. Now, don't forget, he also asked him to ask for a boon, right? He asked him to ask for a benediction, which is not mentioned at first here. But then in a few, I can't resist, I read ahead, you know, and it says, the boon that he asked for, he wants 1,000,000 ears, so that he can constantly hear the nectar flowing from the mouths of the pure devotees describing your glories, O Lord. That's the boon he wanted. So this is the real request of a pure devotee. It comes up again and again in the Bhagavatam. Prahlad Maharaj. Remember Prahlad Maharaj, he offered these wonderful prayers after Hiranyakashipu was killed. The prayers are full of all kinds of siddhanta, you know, they're constantly quoted. Then at the end of them, of course, Nrsingadeva is very ecstatic. He becomes Komala Nrsinga. You know, mostly we see the Ugra Nrsinga in the height of his anger at Hiranyakashipu, frightening. You know, we even have that painting, which you don't put up in the temple so much, of him ripping him apart, wearing the Antarmali. We had a devotee named Antarmali in when I first joined. No one knew what it meant. You know, what is Antarmali? We found out Antar means innards, you know, inside. In other words, wearing a garland of intestines. That's you know, heavy duty. So that was a painting. They painted him with the garland of intestines. Anyway, So that's Ugra, and he wasn't cooled down after he killed the Hiranyakashipu. He knocked him off his lap, and then he started annihilating all of these other demons. Why is it? The demons, they're so stupid. Here's the head demon, Hiranyakashipu, who was running the universe, who was most powerful, and he was dispatched in a different way, really, by the Lord. Now we're going to get revenge. It's just a perfect, it happens again in Dhenukasura, and Prabhupada says his friends and associates, I love that, his friends and associates, other donkey demons, they all ran forward to avenge, In other words, they're not donkeys, they're great yogis who are taking this form, but because they're enraged, their intelligence is completely covered, and they just, like moths running into a fire, So, after all of that annihilation, and he's still angry. There's all of these demons. This is Nrsingadev. They're all disembodied, not disembodied, but dismembered, and blood is everywhere. And so Brahma is at maybe 100 yards offering his prayers, and Lakshmi is offering, and Indra is offering. It's in the seventh canto, but they're not able to pacify him with these prayers. They're incredible prayers. So they said, Prahlad, you go forward. He likes you. See if you can pacify. So Prahlad is completely fearless. He goes forward and bows down, and immediately Nrsingadev becomes Komala. Komala means gentle and soft. And that's, you see some, I have a nice little picture. We had a Komala Nrsinga here for some time. Were you here? It used to be, it wasn't on the altar. It stayed in Gandharvika's house for some time. Huh? It's up in the ISV. I was in LA for a long time. It came up here from, he came up here from Mexico. It was carved for a sannyasi down there, then he left the movement, so he brought it up here and gave it, and he's been traveling. But it's a whole different mood, he's got the little smile and this gentle aspect, So that's, the Lord, when his heart is moved by his pure devotees, he shows his most loving and gentle aspect. So Prithu here has received this instruction. He's taken it on his head. He's going to follow it. And Prabhupada emphasizes that whole point here. That's how we should take the instructions of the Lord. Anything spoken by the person advocate should be taken as it is, with great care and attention and with great respect. So now think of the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita is filled with all kinds of instructions. And some of them are like really heavy. Like I remember reading the second chapter. And he's just, of course, it's a summary of the content, so you deal with a lot of different things. And Arjun wants to know the quality of a devotee who's fixed in consciousness. This Vivasayatmaka Buddhi verse. And then it's explained, one whose intelligence is fixed in devotional service. So then Krishna starts describing it. And the first verse is like, whoa, that's a pretty high standard to reach, What is it? I'm always thinking the second one, Dukkeshvana Vignamana. Anyway, he says that all of the desires that arise in the mind, one should reject them. All of the material desires. That's a prajahati. Yada kaman sarvan parta manogatan apmane vamanatushtas chitta pragyastadotade. So prajahati means to throw them far away. In other words, once they're gone, they're gone. You're not going to let them trickle back, Prajahati yada, whenever these desires arise in the mind, you throw them far away. Prajahati yada kaman sarvan, all of them, parta manogatan, born out of the mind, fertile mind. And and to be completely satisfied in the self. Now, of course, that means satisfied in Krishna consciousness. Stita pragya, such as the next one is also difficult. Dukkeshvana vignamana, sukeshu bhagataspaha, vita raga bhaya krodha stita dhiyamunaruchate. So these are like absolute instructions. It's not like you can immediately, say, okay, now, whenever there's some trouble, I'm just going to become completely unperturbed. It's not like it's something voluntary you can do. You can aspire for that, and you can see that what he's saying there, these are the symptoms of one who has reached a high level of Krishna consciousness. Now we saw that in Prabhupada, how all of this difficulty he had coming to America, suffering a stroke and a heart attack on the sea, And what to speak of all the craziness, I mean, the building the movement, seeing it grow. He had to deal with so many devotees who weren't doing what they were supposed to do, who left. One devotee in Hawaii just sold the temple, made off with $40,000. A trusted devotee who he had, put in a position of authority. Now, I mean, I can't even conceive of that. It would just discourage me completely. I said, who are these people, But no, Dukeshana Vignamana, he was not disturbed by these difficulties, And of course, Vita Raga Bhaya Krodha, no lust, anger, greed, or anything. So that's we have to worship the instructions. In other words, receive the instructions and pray for the spiritual strength to be able to follow them. But the point is, we need to accept them as valid. When Krishna says at the end, Sarva Dharma Parityaja Mamekam Sharanam Vraja, give up all other dharmas, all other religions, whatever you may, and just surrender unto me. I'll protect you from everything. That'll be all auspicious. Well, okay, that's something that we accept as true, as the greatest boon. We may not be able to do that right away, but we should move toward that. We should aspire to that and do the things that help us to come to that point. That's what it means here for us. With great care and attention and with great respect, we should be taken. Not a business to amend the words of the Supreme God and make additions or alterations. Now, some people think, and that Dravida, he's been making the additions and alterations now for 30, 40 years, But that's not what's mentioned there. That's not what's been talking about. What I've been trying to do for all these years is to bring out the actual meaning that is intended. One of the things that we tend to forget is, and Prabhupada, he mentioned this in his first books, which is the Bhagavatam books, is that he says, the English is, I'm paraphrasing, he says, English is definitely my second language, and my effort will surely fail. What he's doing is he's giving a commentary on a verse in the Bhagavatam in which Narada Muni is encouraging Vyasadeva to write the Bhagavatam. Now, I've just been hearing lectures that Prabhupada has given on these verses, which he often quoted. And the first one is Nayadvachas chitta badang hare yashod jagat pavitram pagarita karachit, which says those words, those literary construction, chitra padang, it may be very nicely composed on a material level, with all kinds of poetic ornaments and whatever Shakespeare. But if it doesn't have anything to do with Krishna, if it doesn't glorify Krishna, who purifies the whole universe and can purify us, then it's like a garbage heap, a pilgrimage place for crows. Now, what Prabhupada says, I swear, on this tape, is that Narada Muni is comparing all the other books that he wrote already to that pilgrimage of crows. Which is like, whoa, that includes the Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita, and all those other Puranas, which some of them have something about Krishna, Padma Purana. He hadn't yet written Bhagavatam. He'd written all the others. He'd written Vedanta Sutra. He's making the point that you have insufficiently glorified Krishna. In other words, if you just had the Bhagavad Gita, we could give up everything and surrender. But what about all of the things we have in the Bhagavatam? The explanation or description of Krishna's pastimes, which give us models of how to actually worship Krishna at the highest level. There wouldn't be enough to really draw our mind away from Maya and take it to Krishna. We need the rest of we need the CC, we need Lord Chaitanya's movement, we need the Hare Krishna mantra, which is not there in the Bhagavad Gita. So, as he goes on, he encourages him to write a book, which turns out to be the Bhagavatam, which is wholly and solely dedicated to bhakti, to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, description of who he is, how he appears in this world, all the details of the different avatars, the process of bhakti, great devotees, an example, just as Maharaj Prithu. So that's the message that Srila Prabhupada gave. And it needed editing. If you read the first canto, it's very moving, especially for devotees who are used to Prabhupada's language, and you can get the meaning there. But it's not presented in such a way that it will have mass appeal. It has appeal to the devotees, But these books are meant to bring people who are not devotees also to Krishna consciousness. So they needs polishing, and Prabhupada authorized that. So the task is to present it in such a way that it preserves, as far as possible, Prabhupada's original language, but makes adjustments where necessary to bring out the actual meaning. I don't want to get into so many examples, but just one example. The word sufficient and sufficiently, I think I've mentioned this before. That seems like, well, that's an obvious, we know what that means, right? It means enough, right? There was sufficient rain to grow the crops. And most of the time when Prabhupada uses those words, that's what he means. But there's another meaning that's not present in modern American English, but is present in English, which is what Prabhupada learned at Scottish Churches College, and when he was growing up in India in the early 20th century. And that is abundantly. That's sufficient means abundantly, So, in other words, if you were, as I think maybe it's mentioned in Krishna book, that Nanda Maharaj is explaining to little Krishna, when we worship Indra, then we get sufficient rain and the crops flourish. That use is sufficient. If you go to the Sanskrit, it means abundant, at the right time, but abundant rain, that's enough for the crops. Anyway, it's one of the many things that you have to know in order to properly edit it, so that it says what properly. The meaning he wants to convey needs to be received, And if the words are not understood in the same way, it causes confusion. Anyway, I'm not going to get into the whole editing thing, but that's not what Prabhupada is talking about here. He's talking about his old friend, Gandhi, and this is another thing on this tape, who tried to screw out pure nonviolence from Bhagavad Gita. Now, it is true, if you read Bhagavad Gita, that ahimsa is one of the principles of knowledge. I think in the 13th chapter it's mentioned several times. But there's no way that that's an absolute principle. The whole thing ends with Arjuna taking up his bow and fighting a war. There's no absolute principle of nonviolence, and it's not an absolute principle in human dealings either. It is certainly a kind of a default for devotees to do as little harm to others as possible, even the insects and certainly the cows, even the plants. You're not going to just rip up plants, It all has to have Christian service and whatever is necessary. But the idea is that that's how the Gita has been misused. It's been misused by those who have some ulterior motive, and they try to screw out impersonal, conclusion from the Gita, which is very common, where it ends up with, Krishna saying, surrender to me, bhaktya mam abhijanati, that I can only be known, there's no truth superior to me. We just read in the 7th chapter. Very important verse. Matta padatarang nanyat kincharasti dhanandya. That one line, Krishna is saying there's nothing superior to me, including the Brahman. And then the end of the 14th chapter, Brahmanohi pratishtaham. I am the basis of the Brahman. There's this wonderful Vyasa Puja offering. A lot of devotees don't read those, but there's some real gems in there. Years ago, Shivaram Swami wrote his offering, and he was recounting an experience that he had at a program. I think it was in England that they were throwing. But they invited various spiritual authorities and this and that. So he ended up sitting next to an impersonalist, who's a known Mayavadi. Maybe he was famous in the area, So he got into this argument with him. Somebody's trying to give a speech, but there's this loud argument going on in the back of the stage, And he was defeating him by various quotes that Prabhupada had taught him. One of which was this Brahmanohi pratishtaham. I am the basis of the Brahman effulgence, So, but somehow you can distort that. The favorite one Prabhupada would quote is Dr. Radha Krishnan, who was the president of India at one point. He was a scholar, and he wrote a Bhagavad Gita, which I have on my shelf, because believe it or not, many of these translations that we have in the Bhagavad Gita were kind of cribbed from there and kind of mixed with Prabhupada's. There's a whole thing of trying to disentangle that sometimes. Like in the famous verse, Najayate Mriyate Vakadachan. We should know this one, 220. This is like a summary of the whole point of those 20 verses on the soul in the 2nd chapter. For the soul, there is never birth or death at any time. He has not come into being, does not come into being, and will not come into being. Now that phrase more or less perfectly renders what Prabhupada said. But what we had there for years with the other Gita, the old Gita, and some devotees insist on holding on to that, is that having once been, he never ceases to be. Now, Jayavada Maharaj poured out in his point, but that sounds Christian. They think that the soul that you come into being when you're born, right? You got one chance to surrender to Jesus. And then it's either heaven or hell. Isn't that more or less it? You maybe go to purgatory for a while. We came into being when we were born. That's a big problem, because then the whole law of karma and transmigration is out the window. You see the problem? We have not come into being. And he says, having once been, that means you've come into being. So that was brought in from Radha Krishna. And Jayavada Maharaj, in a consultation with Gopi Paranandana, said, no, we go back to what Prabhupada said. Has not come in, does not come in, will not come into being. Emphasizing that we're as eternal as Krishna is. Ajo, Nitya, Shat, you can apply all these things directly to Krishna. Can you imagine saying, Krishna having come into being will not go? Are you kidding me? That's what language you use when something comes into being. Anyway, I'm not going to get off into this, but it's on my mind, you can see. So we have to know what the words are that Krishna is speaking, and then we have to accept them without additions, alterations. There's something called half-hen logic. You know what that is. What is half-hen logic? You know what? Yeah. But how is it used? The most important way it's used, You know? Yeah, the Shastra. Yeah. In other words, this is mentioned in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. He uses this phrase, half-hen logic. And once there was a foolish farmer who was getting abundant eggs from a productive hen, but he was very calculating. He said, I have to feed the hen to get the eggs. So I'll just cut off the head. I won't have to feed him anymore, and I'll just get the eggs. So he cuts the head off, he doesn't get anything. So similarly, when we read the Shastra, there are certain parts that are very enlivening. This description of this or whatever. But then there are other things demanding or recommending various austerities and rules and regulations. So I'll just read these other parts, the classic thing. I'll just go to the 10th canto, and not even just the 10th canto. I'm just going to go to the rasa dance section. That's my, Shastra. I'm still reading Bhagavatam, right? And Prabhupada, they have this bhagawatsaptaha, which is 7-day reading of Bhagavatam. It's a common thing in India. And they'll get somebody who's famous for doing that, and it'll be very But what are they reading? Mostly they're reading, I think, rasa dance. And they'll put on all of these, ecstasies, faking them. Bhajinarayan Maharaj loved to tell the story of the guy's crying, the tears are coming. And then he goes out in the back off the stage, and he pulls out the chilies from his nose. It was completely artificial. So that's half-hand logic. I don't like this part, I won't read it, I won't worry about that, but I like this part. No, you have to accept, if you're going to accept the guru or spiritual master, then, that's a serious commitment. And you have to do things that you might not want to do on your own, but you do them because they're pleasing to the spiritual master, and like that. And that's training for, taking your pleasure in Krishna's pleasure. There's a part of the Bhagavad Gita, there's a statement where Krishna says, one who does not endeavor on his own, aren't we endeavoring all the time? But the idea is that the impetus for your action is not coming from you. It's coming from the Guru, from Krishna, from the devotees. In other words, you don't have any separate interest. This is the pure devotee. Prabhupada was doing so many things, but in many important way, he was doing nothing, because he was doing nothing on his own account. The impetus for the action was coming from his spiritual master, through the parampara, ultimately from Krishna. That's what it means to be a pure devotee. Is that your entire desire is simply to please your superior, Krishna. And the perfect example that forever is Radharani. Her whole life is simply dedicated to giving Krishna pleasure. She's dressing herself for that reason. She's coming out, she's insulting him for that reason because she knows he likes that. I mean, it gets complicated, but that's that's what that is all about. So it begins with accepting the order, accepting the instructions of the superior on one's head as one's life and soul. And Prabhupada says, the additions and the old days is the custom of so many scholars who comment on the words of the Gita. This is the way to receive knowledge through the parampara system. Okay, so any comments or questions on these points? It's a simple point, but it's an essential point. Receiving the instructions, taking them into our heart, and trying our darndest to fulfill them. Yes. Raja Mohan.
Just something really quick that popped in my mind when you were speaking about how important the presentation of something is. I was reading Adi Raj Prabhu, the Hare Krishna quote book published by the BBT yesterday, and there was quite a few spelling mistakes, and I was reading through it, and then I was like, oh, that's off-putting, And even though it's not at all a philosophical book, it's not something that is really important if the spelling is perfect, but quite a few things that are like an E somewhere where there shouldn't be an E, or like things like that, and I was like, I kind of get it now.
Somehow we published that, but I never went through it.
Yeah, there's quite a few just in the beginning.
I really remember never reading those recipes. But that's a shame. I mean, that shows that it was done long time ago, before the advent of spell check, which has made my job a lot easier over the years. Did you have something, Bala?
Yeah, just in relation to that, what he was saying about the books being edited properly, because just within the academic world, if there's some mistakes, if the words don't, if they're not spelled right, or so many mistakes there could be. If there are mistakes and people don't take them seriously, it's just they think, oh, what is this? I mean,
especially in Shastra, which is supposed to be beyond the four defects, beyond the mistakes.
I mean, even people who are just I know some people, and they're like intelligent people, you could say, and they say, oh yeah, when I read an article, if there's some mistakes in there, then immediately, because they want to read something that intelligent person wrote, they immediately think, oh, well, they don't take it so seriously. Now, of course, Prabhupada, he was the most intelligent and pure devotee and everything, but as you said, it's his second language, and Prabhupada requested help from his disciples.
Yes, he did.
So I always look at it as that they should be, of course, they're spiritually perfect, but they should be materially perfect for the university, fools and rascals, so they could become devotees.
Yeah, I'll give you an example of that. See, these things stick in my mind. In the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, maybe I can pull this up. It may still be in here, because this one was not fixed in 1983. It was fixed later when I noticed it. And that is 4th chapter. Is it the 2nd verse? I think it's the 2nd verse. No. 3rd. 4th. But he quotes here it is. It's the 5th verse, where Krishna says, many, many births both you and I have passed. I can remember all of them, but you cannot, O subduer of the enemy. There's nothing wrong with that. Then he quotes the Brahma Samhita. Yeah, this mistake is still in here. Haibal, thanks. I'm sure you have to leave for some important reason. Very, very well-known verse. Advaitam achyutam anadim anantarupam madhyam parana purusham. 3rd line, Vedeshu durlabham atma bhakto. Which means he's very difficult to attain or understand from the Vedas, from just the study of the Vedas, but he's easy to attain for Atma Bhakto, for those who are serving it from the heart. But Prabhupada renders that. Now he typed this out. 4th chapter, he's still typing it out. Such eternal, blissful, all-knowing forms. I worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Govinda, who is the original person, absolute, infallible, without beginning. Although expanded into unlimited forms, he's still the same original, the oldest, and the person always appearing as a fresh youth. He's original Purana Purusham, means ancient person, but Navayovanam. He has these two qualities, but he's a fresh youth. It doesn't get old. Then the third line. Such eternal, blissful, all-knowing forms of the Lord are usually understood by the best of scholars, but they are always manifest to pure, unalloyed devotees. Now, does anyone see anything wrong with that? They're usually understood by the best Vedic scholars. There's a word missing. Not. Prabhupada does sometimes leave words out. And it's typing with one finger, there's so much going on, he's typing. The word not, which kind of changes the meaning a little bit. Such eternal blissful, so now it reads, this is the Pocket Vedas, which is based on old versions of the books. It's still the new version, it's still the 1983 edition. But I found this and fixed it. Within the last 20 years, that's now 36 years old. It goes back to 83. Such eternal, blissful, all-knowing forms of the Lord are usually not understood even by the best Vedic scholars, but they are always manifest to pure, unalloyed devotees. So someone would say, no, Prabhupada typed that, I said, no. That's, 100 times. I mean, he spoke on that and how he left the word out. Another word he left out, and there's this 1:2:21 verse in the Bhagavatam. And let's call it up real quick, then we'll go. This one is still in there, except the latest Vedabase has it fixed. But it hasn't been printed yet. Hopefully it will be printed. Now we have a textual revision review board. So they're going to review everything I did. And who knows what they're going to find. So this is a verse some of you may know. Vidyate vidya granchasti. After he says, Shinvatam Sakata Krishna, when, with his hearing, he's got a real taste for hearing about Krishna within the heart. He gets rid of all the impurities, and when come Nashtapraya Shabhadreshu, when they're almost gone, then you get fixed in goodness, and all lust, anger, greed is overcome, and then even prasanna manaso bhagavat bhakti yogana bhagavat tattva vijnanam, you get realized knowledge. In other words, realization. It's not just theoretical. And you become fully joyful. And then the next verse is this one. Vidyate vidya grantis, chidyante sarva samshaya, chiyante chasya karmani, drishta evatmanishvare. Thus the knot in the heart is pierced, and all misgivings are cut to pieces. The chain of fruitive actions is terminated when one sees the self as master. Now that last phrase there puzzled me as soon as I read it. And devotees, especially translators, say, well, what do we make of that? The self, with a small s, is conventionally the individual soul. It's not the super soul. But we see, after all of this now, we're at the last point, we're purified, and now I see myself as the master, as the Ishvara. I thought, that's not what we're going toward, is it? So they say, how do we solve that? Okay, well, what Prabhupada said was, this chain of fruitive actions is terminated with the seeing of one's self, the dominating factor. No punctuation, no words in there. With the seeing of oneself. When you say oneself, there's no question that it's the individual soul. He meant the individual soul. And the word is atmani, unto the self, lower s self. And Ishvara is here. This is another mistake. Hadn't been noticed for 50 years. Ishvara, dominating? No. Prabhupada had dominating factor. That's the one and only time that I know that he used that instead of the master or God, Ishvara, Parameshvara. But anyway, he used that phrase, dominating factor. That's obviously God. That's the Lord. I mean, the common understanding of this phrase by other translators is one sees the Lord in one's heart or in one's mind. Atmani can mean the mind. But Atman Ishvare, you don't know, it could be Atman Ishvare. You see that? Atman can also be the noun there, meaning the self. And that's what Prabhupada is taking, I think. Anyway, it's a puzzle. Now, in the Ishvare, the dominating factor became master. And that's a good change, because in the last paragraph, you have one sees his master. Well, you're seeing God there. You're not just seeing yourself. You're seeing God. And in the first sentence, he says, attaining scientific knowledge of the personality of Godhead. That goes back to the previous verse. The word vijnana, Prabhupada would translate as that, which means seeing directly, no doubt. That's vijnana. That's what it is. So that's scientific knowledge, in other words, direct perception of the personality of Godhead, means seeing one's own self simultaneously. So now you've got it. The puzzle is solved. You're seeing yourself in your original Swarup, your Swarup Siddhi, Siddha Swarup. And you're seeing Krishna in the heart. So therefore, the chain of fruit of action is terminated when one sees oneself and one's master. That word "and" was left out. Just like he left out the word "not," he left out the word "and." No punctuation. One sees the self as master. He didn't put "as." One sees the self, the dominating factor. It was a puzzle, and the first editor couldn't resolve it. Yeah, one sees oneself and the dominating factor, and that dominating factor is God, and Prabhupada called him the master. Okay, that's good, we'll call him master. That makes, Ishvara. One sees oneself and one's master. And it recalls, when you're familiar with the Bhagavatam, that's Narada Muni's realization. Remember when he walked off, his mother had been bitten by a snake, she's gone. What to do, Now a little kid would normally, try to get on the cell phone and call the auntie or something, try to find. There's no cell phones, but he didn't try to find any shelter from family. He just took a shelter of Krishna and walked. 5-year-old kid, he's walking, but he's meditating. Then he sits down and meditates, and he sees the Lord in his heart, and he sees himself as well. Then his meditation broke. He can't see the Lord or himself. That's there in the Bhagavatam. And he's in great distress, and he hears, he says, "Oh, I'm sorry, you can't see me again in this lifetime. I appeared to you just to increase your desire for me." Then he eventually dies, goes, then comes back as a son of Brahma, and he's Narada Muni. But the point is that idea of seeing yourself as well as the Lord in the highest state. What does it mean? That's, you read the CC, you get a revelation of your Siddha Sarup, of your original Siddha Deha, the form that we've forgotten for millions of births, that which you serve Krishna eternally. So that's what's being talked about. All of that is there, but because that word "and" was left out, it's been a mystery all this time. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Now we'll see that when the review board comes in, if they're going to accept my change. If they don't.